Samuel lived alone on his ranch far from the busy towns. His land stretched across quiet valleys and open fields where the wind moved like a slow river. He had lived there for many years, and even though he worked hard every day, he often felt a heavy loneliness in the evenings. The old house had large, empty rooms, and sometimes he wondered how a place could feel so big and yet so silent. His wife had passed away long ago, and he never had children. He filled his days with taking care of cattle, mending fences, and tending to the horses, but his nights were long and quiet. One winter afternoon, the cold wind grew stronger than usual. Snow clouds covered the sky, and Samuel hurried to finish feeding the animals before the storm fully arrived. As he walked back toward his house, he thought he heard something unusual. It sounded like a faint cry carried by the wind. At first he ignored it, thinking it was just the storm beginning, but the sound came again, soft, weak, and filled with fear. Samuel paused, listened carefully, and followed the sound toward the edge of his property. His boots pressed deep tracks into the snow as he moved across the field. The sky grew darker, and the wind blew small pieces of ice against his face. He held his coat tighter and walked faster. When he reached a small rise near the tree line, he finally saw them. Two young Apache girls stood in the snow, shivering, holding each other tightly. Their clothes were thin, their hair was tangled, and their faces were pale from the cold. One girl looked about 9, the other maybe 6. They looked frightened but also too tired to run. Samuel felt a shock in his chest. Children should never be alone in weather like this. He stepped closer, slowly, so they would not fear him. The older girl stepped in front of her sister, trying to protect her, even though she was shaking. Samuel spoke gently, telling them he would not harm them. He asked if they were lost, but the girls did not answer. They only stared at him with wide, uncertain eyes. The younger one looked ready to collapse. Samuel knew he could not leave them outside. The storm was coming fast, and the wind was turning sharp. Without waiting for them to speak, he opened his arms slightly, showing he meant no harm, and told them to follow him. The girls hesitated, exchanging a frightened glance. Then the younger girl took a small step forward, almost falling. The older one caught her and finally nodded. They followed Samuel toward the house. Inside the ranch house, warmth from the small fireplace made the room feel safe. Samuel quickly brought blankets and wrapped them around the girls. Their hands were trembling and their lips were blue from the cold. He heated some soup and placed the bowls gently on the table. At first, they stared at the food, unsure if it was meant for them. Samuel nodded and stepped back so they would not feel crowded. Slowly, the girls began to eat, their movements small and weak. After a while, color started returning to their faces. The older girl finally spoke her name in a soft voice. Lena. The younger one was called Taya. Their tribe had moved several times, and during the travel they became separated from the others. They tried to find their way but ended up lost in the mountains. The cold weather made it harder for them to survive. Samuel listened quietly. He did not interrupt, even when the girls struggled to explain. He felt a deep sympathy for them. They reminded him of how fragile life could be. After they finished eating, he brought fresh water, warm clothes, and let them rest in the guest room. The girls curled together on the bed, still holding each other closely, as if letting go might make the world dangerous again. The storm outside continued through the night. Snow piled against the windows, and the wind howled across the open fields. Samuel sat near the fireplace, thinking about the girls. He had found strangers on his land before, travelers, lost ranch hands, cowboys, but never two children alone in a storm. He wondered if their tribe was still searching for them or if they even knew the girls had survived. He decided that the moment the storm passed, he would look for signs of their people. But for now, his duty was to keep the girls safe. By the next morning, the storm had softened. A thick blanket of snow covered everything. Samuel checked the guest room and saw the girls still sleeping peacefully. For the first time in a long while, his house felt different. There was a quiet warmth that did not come from the fire. It came from the presence of life, from the sound of soft breathing behind the door. When the girls woke, they were less afraid. Lena helped her younger sister with the clothes Samuel had left for them. They walked into the kitchen, looking shy but more comfortable. Samuel made a simple breakfast and sat across from them. He asked gentle questions, nothing too personal, just enough to understand what they needed. The girls answered in short sentences, but slowly began to trust him. Over the next few days, the storm made it impossible to travel. The roads were covered, and the nearby river froze at the edges. Samuel kept the girls warm and fed. He taught them small chores to pass the time, like sweeping the porch or giving hay to the horses. To his surprise, they were quick learners and eager to help. Taya giggled softly when a horse nudged her shoulder. Lena watched everything carefully, her eyes sharp, like she wanted to understand how this new world worked. Samuel noticed that the girls brought something alive into the house that he had been missing for years. Their laughter, their small footsteps, their whispers at night. It all made the ranch feel different. Once, while chopping wood outside, he heard the girls chatting by the window. Their voices made him smile without him noticing. Every evening, Samuel sat with them by the fireplace. He shared simple stories from his life on the ranch, and the girls listened quietly. They did not share much about their past, but he did not push them. He knew they carried memories that might be too painful to speak about. Instead, he created a safe place where they could feel calm. Days turned into weeks. The snow melted slowly, but Samuel kept delaying the search for the tribe. Part of him knew he had to return the girls, but another part feared the emptiness that would return when they left. He had not felt such company in years. Still, he reminded himself that the girls had a family somewhere. They needed to be reunited. Lena and Taya grew stronger each day. They helped Samuel with almost everything, feeding animals, washing dishes, gathering firewood. The ranch felt more alive than it had in decades. Even the horses seemed more energetic, responding to the girls' gentle touches. One afternoon, while out riding, Samuel found tracks that suggested a group had passed through days earlier. His heart grew heavy. It was time to search for their people. He returned home quietly and watched the girls playing near the barn. Their laughter floated in the cool air, and he felt a sadness he had not expected. He had grown attached to them, more than he meant to. The next morning, he told the girls he would try to find their tribe. Their smiles faded for a moment, but Lena nodded with understanding. She was older than her years, mature in a way that came from hardship. Taya looked confused, not fully grasping the meaning of his words. But she held Lena's hand tightly. Samuel saddled his horse and prepared to search. Before he left, Lena handed him a small wooden charm. She told him it was for good luck. Samuel accepted it with a soft smile, touched by her gesture. For several days, he searched the valleys and ridges. He spoke to travelers and looked for signs of camps. Finally, he found a group of Apache people who had been searching tirelessly for the two girls. Their faces showed relief when he told them the children were safe. When Samuel returned to the ranch with the news, the girls looked both happy and sad. They hugged him tightly, clinging to him as if they were torn between two worlds. The tribe arrived the next day, and the reunion was emotional. The girls' relatives thanked Samuel with deep gratitude. As the tribe prepared to leave, Lena and Taya ran to Samuel one last time. They told him they would come back one day, that they would not forget him. Samuel nodded, but deep inside, he believed their promise was simply a child's kindness. He stood by the gate as they disappeared into the distance, and the ranch became quiet once again. The ranch grew quiet after the girls left. The sound of their small footsteps faded, and the rooms that once echoed with their laughter returned to silence. Samuel walked through the house as if something important was missing. He would glance toward the guest room door, expecting to hear whispers or soft giggles, but instead, he heard only the crackle of the fireplace or the wind pushing against the windows. Even though he had prepared himself for their departure, he still felt a hollow space inside his chest. He reminded himself that they belonged with their people, but it did not lessen the loneliness that followed. Days passed, and Samuel went back to his usual routine. He woke before sunrise, fed the animals, checked the fences, and repaired equipment. These were tasks he knew well, tasks he had done for years, but they felt heavier now. Without the girls around, the ranch seemed larger and emptier. Sometimes he found himself making extra portions of food by accident, forgetting there were no small hands waiting at the table anymore. When he noticed, he would pause and shake his head gently, forcing himself to accept the quiet. Winter slowly ended, and spring brought green grass across the fields. Flowers opened near the water stream, and birds returned to the trees. Samuel looked at the land and felt grateful for its beauty. Yet a small sadness remained. He often thought of the sisters, Lena's thoughtful eyes and Taya's bright smile. He wondered where they were now, if they were safe, if they remembered him. Sometimes he stood outside at dusk, looking toward the distant mountains, imagining the girls walking with their tribes somewhere across the valleys. As the years passed, life continued, but the memory of those two girls stayed in his heart. Whenever he cleaned the house, he found small pieces they left behind, a little wooden carving shaped like a bird, a bracelet woven from old yarn, and tiny handprints on the wall near the kitchen door. Samuel never cleaned those marks off. He kept them as reminders of the brief but precious time the girls had spent with him. People in the nearby town knew Samuel as a quiet man. He would come occasionally to buy supplies, greet a few familiar faces, and return to his ranch. But those who knew him well noticed a change. There was a softness in his expression, a distant look in his eyes, as if a memory followed him everywhere he went. When neighbors asked if he ever thought about marrying again or having a family, he simply shook his head. He said he had already known what it felt like to care for children, even if only for a short time. 15 years slowly passed. Seasons changed again and again. New families arrived in the region. Old friends moved away or passed on. The world beyond the ranch grew busier. New roads were built, trains came closer to the area, and more settlers traveled through the territory. But Samuel's ranch remained much the same. He kept it clean, well cared for, and peaceful. It was a place that aged with him. By the 10th year, Samuel's hair had turned almost completely gray. His hands were rough, lined with years of work. He still rode horses, repaired fences, and managed cattle, but he did everything a little slower now. Even though he remained strong, he felt the weight of time settling into his bones. Yet he continued, because the ranch was all he had. It was the only home he knew, and it was filled with memories, some painful, some warm, and some he could not let go of. Every now and then, when he sat by the fire at night, he remembered the night he found the two sisters. He remembered the snowstorm, the way they shivered in the cold, the way Lena stood protectively in front of Taya, and the way their eyes slowly filled with trust when they realized he meant no harm. Those memories felt distant yet so clear, like a picture he could never erase. He wondered if they had grown tall, if they had families now, or if they lived in a different region. Sometimes he even imagined them grown up, walking through their village with confidence, unaware of how deeply he still cared about them. People who visited the ranch noticed a carving placed carefully on the mantel above the fireplace. It was the wooden bird Lena had given him. When asked about it, Samuel always said it was a gift from someone important. He did not explain further. Some thought it came from a family member, but Samuel never corrected them. It was a quiet treasure he held close. Around the 12th year, a drought hit the region. Many ranchers suffered, crops dried up, and rivers became small streams. Samuel worked harder than ever to keep his cattle alive. He traveled long distances to find fresh grazing land, sometimes sleeping under the open sky. Even in those difficult times, one thing never changed. Before sleeping, he would hold the wooden carving in his hand and remember the warmth the girls once brought into his life. It gave him strength on nights when he felt completely alone. During the 15th year, something shifted inside him. He began to speak more softly to his horses, as if they understood his thoughts. He found himself sitting on the porch longer, watching sunsets fade into soft colors. Life had slowed, and he accepted it. He thought less about the future and more about memories. The faces of Lena and Taya often appeared in his thoughts. Their voices echoed faintly in his mind. Taya laughing as she fed a horse. Lena asking questions about ranch life with her curious eyes. Samuel sometimes wondered if the girls would ever return like they had promised. But he told himself not to expect it. Children make promises out of hope, not certainty. He believed they had moved on with their lives just like he had moved on with his. He imagined them growing into strong women, perhaps living near their tribe, far away from the ranch. He told himself they had probably forgotten the old rancher who once protected them. Still, a small part of him held on to the memory like a delicate thread. On quiet nights, he whispered to himself that maybe, just maybe, they remembered. Even if they never returned, he wished they were happy and safe. One late summer evening, Samuel sat outside on the porch with a cup of warm coffee. The air carried the smell of dry grass, and the sky shimmered with fading sunlight. He stared at the distant hills, soaking in the peace of the moment. He was older now, more tired, but still grateful for the simple life he lived. Yet somewhere inside his chest, that familiar emptiness remained. He had lived with it for 15 years. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of the wind. The ranch was calm. The cattle rested in the fields. The horses stood quietly near the fence. Everything felt peaceful, steady, and familiar. He breathed slowly, accepting that this was his life now. A life of quiet days and long evenings. A life of memories and duty. But deep in his heart, he still believed that some connections never truly disappear. The two girls had left a mark on his life, something that time could not erase. He had been a guardian, a helper, a friend during their darkest moment. And they had given him something he never expected, a feeling of family. He held on to that feeling, not because he expected anything in return, but because it reminded him that even in lonely places, kindness creates bonds that live beyond the years. As the sun dipped behind the hills and darkness settled over the ranch, Samuel whispered one quiet thought to the night, a thought he had carried for 15 years. I hope they're safe. He had no idea that the world was already turning in a direction he never expected. He had no idea that the past he thought he lost forever was slowly making its way back to him. And he had no idea that very soon those two little girls, now grown women, would return to his ranch and change his life once again. 15 years had passed since Samuel last saw the two sisters. By now, he had almost convinced himself that they were only a warm chapter of his past, something beautiful, but gone forever. Life had taught him to live quietly, to accept things as they came, and to not expect surprises. But life does not always follow the paths people imagine. Sometimes it brings unexpected moments right when a person believes nothing new will ever happen. It was a bright summer afternoon when Samuel first sensed something unusual. The air was warm, and the sun hung directly over the open fields. He had spent the morning fixing a broken gate on the south side of the ranch. The cattle were grazing peacefully, and the horses rested under the shade near the barn. Everything felt normal, ordinary, steady, the kind of day Samuel had lived 100 times before. As he walked back toward the house, he heard the faint sound of horses in the distance. It surprised him. Visitors rarely came to his ranch without sending word first. He stopped and listened carefully. The steady rhythm of hooves grew clearer, approaching from the direction of the old trail that led from the valley. Samuel wiped sweat from his forehead and waited. Maybe it was a neighbor or someone needing help, or perhaps a traveler who lost their way. But as the riders came closer, something inside him stirred, something he could not explain. He didn't know why, but a strange feeling settled in his chest, almost like a memory trying to wake up. 2 horses appeared at the top of the hill. As they drew nearer, Samuel saw 2 figures sitting tall and steady in the saddles. Both wore long hair tied with simple bands. Sunlight touched their faces, but they were too far for him to recognize. He took a step forward, shading his eyes with his hand, trying to make sense of the sight. The riders slowed as they approached the wooden gate. The horses stopped gracefully, their breaths calm and controlled. Then the 2 women dismounted with smooth movements that showed years of experience. For a moment, they stood still, looking straight at Samuel. The first woman, tall, steady, and confident, had deep, calm eyes that seemed to tell a story without words. The second woman, slightly shorter, had gentle features, and her eyes carried a softness that felt strangely familiar. Samuel felt the world tilt slightly. His breath caught in his chest. It could not be. It simply could not be. Then the taller one stepped forward. Her voice was clear and steady as she spoke 2 simple words that made Samuel's body freeze. "Hello, Samuel." He stared at her, heart pounding, unable to answer. The tone, the shape of her face, the look in her eyes. He knew this presence. She smiled gently, a smile that reminded him of a shy little girl who once stood in his kitchen with trembling hands. "Lena," he whispered. The woman nodded. He turned to the other. The younger woman stepped closer, her eyes bright with emotion. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she lifted her hand slightly as if afraid the moment would break if she moved too fast. "Taya?" he asked in a broken voice. She smiled. A soft smile that he remembered from long ago. The same smile she used to give when she fed his horses or listened to his stories. "Yes, Samuel," she said quietly. "It's me." For a long moment, none of them moved. The world seemed to pause. The wind, the animals, the valley. Everything felt silent, as if time itself wanted to respect the reunion. Samuel felt his chest grow tight. He had imagined these girls countless times over the years, wondered where they were, hoped they were safe. But he never imagined they would stand before him again, grown, strong, and confident. You came back," he said softly, barely believing the words. Lena smiled with warmth. "We promised we would." Samuel shook his head gently, still stunned. "I didn't think you remembered. It's been so long." "We never forgot," Lena said. "Not a single year." Taya nodded eagerly. "You saved us." "We always wanted to return." Samuel felt his vision blur with emotion, something he could hardly control. He blinked and turned away for a moment to gather himself. When he looked back, the 2 young women were still standing there, waiting patiently, understanding without him saying a word. They walked through the gate together. Samuel led them toward the porch, still struggling to believe they were real. He studied them closely. Lena had grown into a strong woman with confident posture. Her eyes reflected wisdom and calmness, almost like the mountains that surrounded their world. Taya had become graceful, gentle, and warm-hearted. Both carried themselves with dignity and peace, a sign of years lived with purpose and strength. They sat down on the porch steps. Samuel felt like he had stepped into a dream. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions but couldn't find the right words. Lena broke the silence. "We searched for years, Samuel. Our tribe moved many times. It took a long time before we could find this place again." Taya added softly, "We wanted to come earlier, but it wasn't possible." Samuel listened quietly. He felt no anger for the delay, no disappointment, only gratitude. "You came. That's what matters," he said. They laughed softly, relieved by his reaction. After a while, Samuel stood up and invited them inside. When they stepped into the house, the sisters paused. The wooden floor, the fireplace, the old table, it all felt familiar to them in a distant, warm way. Taya whispered, "It's just like before." Lena touched the mantel where the wooden bird still sat. Her fingers trembled slightly. "You kept it," she said. Samuel nodded. Of course. It was a gift. Her eyes softened. She looked at him with deep emotion, but she said nothing more. They spent hours talking. They told Samuel about the years after they were reunited with their people. They spoke of their mother, who had passed peacefully years earlier. They told him about their travels, their tribe's new settlements, the changes they witnessed, and the dreams they followed. Lena had become a respected leader among her people. Taya had learned traditional healing and often cared for children in their village. Listening to them speak, Samuel felt amazement and pride. These were no longer fragile girls needing protection. They were strong, capable women who had carved their own paths. Every now and then, Taya would laugh softly, and the sound would bring Samuel back to memories of her as a child, giggling while brushing the horses. Lena would give thoughtful answers, showing the same careful thinking she had as a girl. But there was something else, too. Something they had not said yet. Samuel sensed it. Their visit was not only for memories. There was a deeper reason behind their return. As evening settled over the ranch, the sisters finally exchanged a look, a silent agreement between them. Lena turned toward Samuel. "There's something we want to tell you," she said gently. Samuel sat up straight, listening carefully. "You did not only save us," Lena continued. "You changed our lives. You taught us kindness when we were afraid. You gave us shelter when we had no one. Our people never forgot what you did." Taya nodded and added softly, "We came today to thank you properly. After so many years, this was long overdue." Samuel felt overwhelmed by their words. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Lena continued. "And that's not all. We came with a purpose." Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly, curious and nervous at the same time. The sisters exchanged another look. Taya smiled softly, courage shining in her eyes. "We came to bring you home," she said. Samuel blinked, confused. "Home?" Lena nodded. "Our tribe wants you to live with us. They said you are part of our family. They want to welcome you." Samuel stared at them, stunned. He looked at Lena, at Taya, at their sincere eyes. He didn't know how to respond. He felt unprepared for such a gift, such an invitation. For years he had accepted loneliness. For years he had lived with only memories. And now, the very people who filled his past with warmth were offering him a future he never expected. The air felt different, heavy with emotion and possibility. The sisters waited patiently, giving him time to absorb the moment. Samuel rested his hands on his knees, breath slow, heart loud in his chest. He realized that his life, which he thought had settled into quiet routine forever, was changing. And it was all because the two girls he once saved had returned, not as children needing help, but as women with the power to change his destiny. Samuel sat quietly on the porch, trying to understand the words he had just heard. The soft evening light rested on the ranch, turning the fields golden. The mountains stood calmly in the distance, the same mountains he had looked at every day for more than 20 years. But suddenly, everything around him felt different. The sisters' offer hung in the air like a warm breeze that carried both hope and confusion. Taya sat beside him, watching his face carefully. She could see he was struggling with the idea. Lena stood near the porch railing, giving him space, but staying close enough to show she cared. Neither of them pushed him to answer. They waited with patience, the same patience Samuel had once shown them when they were frightened children in a snowstorm. "Live with your tribe," Samuel finally whispered. The words sounded strange coming from his mouth. He had spent almost his entire life here. Every fence post, every corner of the house, every path through the fields carried a memory. He had built this place with his own hands, and for many years the ranch had been the only thing keeping him grounded. But it was also the place where he had spent countless nights alone, speaking only to the sky or the horses, finding company in silence, and working through days that all felt the same. Now, the two girls he once rescued, now strong women, were offering him something he never expected: a family, a community, a new chapter. Taya spoke softly, her voice gentle like a calm stream. "Samuel, you spent your life alone for too long. You don't have to anymore. Our people know what you did for us. They consider you part of us." Lena added, "You gave us safety when we had nothing. Our tribe believes it is our turn to give you a home where you will never be alone." Samuel looked at both of them. Their eyes held sincerity, love, and deep gratitude. He could see they were not offering this out of duty, but from their hearts. He felt his throat tighten as memories rushed back, Lena sweeping the porch with tiny hands, Taya giggling as she tried to feed a carrot to a stubborn horse, both girls curling together under warm blankets during the winter nights. He never expected those moments to return to him in any way. Yet here they were, sitting on his porch as grown women, offering him more than he had ever imagined. But leaving the ranch, that thought weighed heavily on him. "I don't know," he said quietly. "This place, it's my life. It's everything I've ever known." Lena stepped closer and sat on the porch step across from him. "We understand. We're not asking you to leave everything behind if it hurts you. We only want you to know you have a place with us. You are welcome. You always will be." Taya nodded. "We want to give you the same feeling you gave us: safety, warmth, and family." Samuel lowered his head. He rubbed his hands together slowly, thinking deeply. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the hills, and warm shadows stretched across the yard. It was the hour of the day he usually felt most alone. But today he felt something else. Something like comfort, like belonging. After a long silence, he sighed. Not with sadness, but with acceptance. "I'm old," he said gently. "Not too old to move, but old enough to be tired. These fields have kept me busy for so many years. Sometimes I wake up with nothing but work to look forward to." He looked around the ranch, seeing it through a new lens. The fields were beautiful, yes. The barn and house held memories, yes. But they also held years of emptiness. Years of quiet that had slowly weighed on his spirit. Then he turned back to the sisters. Maybe it's time for something new," he said. Taya's eyes lit up with pure happiness. She reached for his hand softly, and Samuel let her hold it. Lena smiled with a quiet relief, as if she had been hoping for this moment for years. But still, neither pushed him too fast. "You can come whenever you are ready," Lena said. "Tomorrow, next week, next month. We will help you with everything." Samuel nodded slowly. The idea no longer felt strange. Instead, it felt like a door opening after many years of being locked. The sisters stayed on the ranch for the next few days. They helped Samuel with chores, cooked meals with him, and brought energy back into the quiet house. They hung blankets outside to dry, swept the porch, and organized the kitchen in ways they remembered from childhood. Samuel found himself smiling more in those few days than he had in years. Every morning, the sisters walked with him through the fields. They asked him about the ranch, his animals, and the lands around him. They listened carefully, as if collecting pieces of his life to carry with them. Samuel realized they remembered everything: where he kept the tools, how he fed the horses, the way he chopped wood, the way he brewed morning coffee, and each reminder warmed him. One afternoon, they visited the old tree by the river where the girls used to play. Samuel stood beside them as adults now, the memory almost unbelievable. Taya touched the rough bark of the tree and whispered, "I used to think this tree was taller." Samuel chuckled softly. "You were smaller." Lena smiled. "We still remember the day you brought us here. It was the first time we felt safe after the storm." Those words touched Samuel deeply. He felt a mix of pride and emotion he could not express, so he simply nodded, letting the moment speak for itself. As their visit drew to an end, the sisters gently reminded him that their offer still stood. "We will return for you," Lena said. "Tell us when." Samuel felt calm, not rushed. I think I will be ready soon." Taya hugged him tightly. "We will help you pack everything. You won't do it alone." The day they left, Samuel walked with them to the gate, just like he had done 15 years earlier. But this time, the goodbye carried no sadness. It carried hope. "We will come back in a few days," Lena promised. "Be ready." Samuel watched them ride away, their silhouettes tall and graceful against the bright sky. His heart felt full of memories, full of gratitude, and full of something he had not felt in years: future. When the sisters disappeared over the hill, Samuel turned and looked at his ranch. Instead of seeing a lonely place, he saw a chapter of his life that had served him well. He felt no anger, no regret, only peace. Over the next few days, he prepared himself slowly. He gathered his tools, folded clothes, and packed old keepsakes. When he came across the wooden bird carving Lena had given him years ago, he held it for a long moment. Then he carefully wrapped it in cloth and placed it in the very top of his bag. It was his most precious reminder of the past, and it would travel with him into a new life. On the morning the sisters returned, Samuel was ready. The sun rose gently over the land he had cared for so long. The horses approached the gate, and Lena and Taya rode with confident, joyful smiles. They helped Samuel load his belongings, and then, with a final long look at the place he had called home, he climbed onto his horse. Together, they rode toward the mountains. Samuel felt the air grow lighter as they traveled. The sisters spoke with him during the ride, telling stories about their tribe, their home, and the people waiting to welcome him. Their voices filled the air with comfort. By the time they reached the valley where their tribe lived, Samuel felt something he had not felt in many, many years. He felt at home. Dozens of people stepped forward, smiling warmly, welcoming him not as a stranger but as family. Children ran curiously around him. Elders greeted him with respect. The place buzzed with life, warmth, and open hearts. For the first time in 15 years, Samuel felt surrounded by people who wanted him there. Lena and Taya stood proudly beside him. "You are not alone anymore," Lena said. "You belong with us now," Taya whispered. Samuel took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and let the feeling settle inside him. The rancher who once lived alone had finally found a family, one he never expected, but one that had always remembered him. He smiled, and the new chapter of his life began.